My wife agreed to the divorce without hesitation, and before I could process it, the divorce papers arrived at my doorstep while I was stationed overseas. Shocked, I immediately called my wife, Lucy, who was adamant about the decision. "That's right," she said coldly. "I'll be seeking a substantial amount of alimony. It's your fault for constantly neglecting our family." To my dismay, my beloved daughter, Hazel, chimed in, "That's correct, Daddy. You have to take responsibility." Hearing Hazel's side with Lucy deeply wounded me. "This will make our lives easier," Lucy added, almost sounding like she relished in tormenting me. Little did she know, I had a plan. To swiftly obtain a divorce, move abroad, and transfer everything into her name. My name is George, and I'm a 55-year-old salesman currently leading the sales department at a prominent trading company. Much like my father, who also worked in sales, I spent a significant portion of my childhood overseas, which allowed me to become fluent in 5 languages. After high school, I moved in with my grandparents and attended a prestigious university. Following in my father's footsteps, I joined a trading company, aspiring to become a globe-trotting salesman. I had numerous employment options, but I chose my current organization due to its active involvement in global trade. Despite obstacles like the economic downturn following the bubble's burst and the stock market crash during the Lehman crisis, I managed to achieve remarkable results. The recent pandemic severely impacted the global economy, but we're gradually recovering. Overseas business trips have resumed, and as the sales head, I frequently travel for crucial negotiations. "Another trip, huh?" Lucy remarked sarcastically as I packed for my next journey. "This one might take a while," I responded calmly, "and I'm counting on you to take care of the house." Lucy smirked, turned away, and left the room. After finishing my packing, I headed to the living room for a break, only to overhear Lucy's discontented voice. "He's making a big show of packing by himself. So passive-aggressive." "Well, it's better if he doesn't need our help, isn't it?" Hazel replied in a conciliatory tone. I sighed, took a few steps back, and cleared my throat before entering the room. "Oh, Dad, are you all ready?" Hazel asked, reaching out to me, but Lucy remained silent, sulking as she turned away. "I'm ready to go," I declared. "Early departure is on the cards tomorrow. This journey will be a lengthy one." I prepared some coffee and returned to my quarters. Lucy and I have occupied separate bedrooms for almost 2 decades. She held seniority over me at the company, working the front desk. With her captivating appearance and effortless charm, she was the center of attention. Men from all corners flocked to her, desperate to capture her affection. Hailing from abroad, I lacked experience with women. I preferred the company of my high school and university friends, never having a romantic partner. To Lucy, I must have seemed like a mere child, undeserving of her time. Yet, as a newcomer, I gained recognition as a promising prospect, inadvertently becoming a sort of celebrity. One day, when I visited the reception, Lucy covertly handed me a hairpin with her phone number inscribed. Most would have been elated, but I was so engrossed in my work that I could not fathom the company's star bestowing such attention upon me. Thus, I disregarded her gesture. On her way home from work, she unexpectedly confronted me and insisted we go to a restaurant. While sipping her wine, she directly asked, "George, do you have a girlfriend?" Feeling nervous, I replied, "No, I'm too focused on learning the job right now." "Ah, you're so serious. But I've heard the executives have high hopes for you. You're talented and multilingual. A true rising star," she said, gazing at me with admiring eyes. I tried to downplay it, saying, "Speaking multiple languages is common here." "And your humility, too. You're truly remarkable," she remarked. Her words didn't particularly move me, but they seemed to inspire something in her. After several more shared meals, we somehow found ourselves in an approved relationship at the company. As my business trips abroad became more frequent, Lucy was always delighted. It's amazing you're taking solo international trips after just 1 year. You're definitely executive material, she'd say, her eyes shining with pride. In time, I grew to genuinely love Lucy, and after 3 years, I proposed. I'm so thrilled, she said. I'll be by your side, ready to uplift and back you up, she'd assured, determined to be a steadfast companion. After our marriage, Lucy resigned from her job. Several of her male coworkers expressed grief and resentment towards me, but by then, I had earned respect in the sales department, and no one dared to voice their complaints directly. Soon after our wedding, we discovered that Lucy was pregnant. We moved quickly, but Lucy was severely affected by morning sickness and found it challenging to manage household chores. I did my best to assist, but nothing I did seemed to satisfy her. The kind Lucy who used to praise me during our courtship had vanished. I kept telling myself that her behavior was solely due to the pregnancy, hoping she would revert to her former self once the morning sickness had passed. However, the reality was not that straightforward. When Hazel was born, the nights were arduous. Lucy would often say, "At least take care of her when you're home," and leave me with a crying Hazel after I returned late at night. On the few days I had off, I spent my time catching up on cleaning and laundry. Being young, I believed that postpartum women were delicate and required gentle treatment, as my parents from abroad had taught me. Despite my exhaustion, I persevered in supporting my family. Lucy often delegated household duties and childcare to me, but she never let me slack off at work. Thankfully, Hazel remained healthy, avoiding any major illnesses. Time passed quickly, and before long, nearly 30 years had gone by, yet my relationship with Lucy had significantly cooled. Nonetheless, I take pride in having given my all for my loved ones. When I was promoted to department head at my company 5 years ago, we even moved to a high-rise apartment, as Lucy had wished. After all, a department head at a prestigious firm is expected to reside in such a setting. For a time, Lucy seemed content, and we coexisted harmoniously. Regrettably, this peace was short-lived, and Lucy's attitude once again turned icy. She was willing to handle Hazel's chores, but refused to take on my share. The misery of performing household tasks with my weary, aging body was indescribable. Thoughts of divorce crossed my mind numerous times, but being constantly occupied and having Hazel nearby deterred me from following through. She speaks ill of me where I can overhear, casting unflattering remarks in my direction. "All right then, I'm off," I muttered quietly in the empty hallway the next early morning and left the house. For me now, work is where I feel most purposeful. After successfully completing the travel procedures and boarding the plane, I closed my eyes. My body felt heavy because I couldn't fall asleep easily last night. As I closed my eyes, yesterday's conversation between Lucy and Hazel echoed in my mind. "Ha, acting as if you've done nothing wrong with that holier-than-thou attitude. That's what I can't stand." Lucy started complaining as soon as I stepped out of the living room with my coffee. "Well, it's because of him working hard that we can enjoy our life, isn't it? I really wish you'd try to keep him in a good mood a bit more." Hazel, with a laugh in her voice, tried to calm Lucy down. When Hazel was young, she was attached to me, always calling Dad Dad. But as she hit puberty, she started to rebel against me. On the other hand, she seemed to gravitate towards Lucy, who wasn't much of a caretaker, but was fashionable and youthful. Lucy, indifferent to parenting, must find Hazel, who speaks sweetly, a more manageable partner compared to me, who can be nagging, especially when it comes to expensive decisions like high school or college enrollment. Hazel, more cunning than Lucy, cleverly navigated between the two of us to benefit herself. Initially troubled by Hazel's rebellious attitude, I was pleased when she became docile, but a certain event made me realize her true nature was twisted. I used to criticize Hazel for not finding a job after graduating from college, calling her activities bridal training while she just hung out. But now, I don't even feel like saying anything. Dad, do you know any good guys at your company? I wish to find someone reliable and wonderful like you, Hazel would occasionally say when I was home, almost like she was flattering me. Well, if I see someone promising, I'll introduce him to you. I'd respond with a smile, but my heart had grown cold. In the end, Hazel probably just wants someone convenient to leech off, just like Lucy does. One victim in this family is enough, so I've been dodging the issue, pretending to look around. You know, he never introduces any men to me. I'm already 28. I want to get married soon and become a graceful stay-at-home wife like you, Mom, Hazel would say. She's already in the midst of her elegant bridal training, isn't she? Well, boring guys like him are just a drag. Wouldn't recommend? They giggled together. But hey, if you want to have fun, there are plenty of ways to do that, right? Ah, Mom, really? Saying that in front of your daughter? They burst into uncontrollable laughter. I entered the room without making a sound, unnoticed by them. Ah, what am I going to do with those two? I thought. But they're my family, after all. I drank my coffee, feeling a sense of emptiness. The coffee was too bitter, keeping me from falling asleep easily. Before I knew it, I had arrived at my destination in Bangkok. It seems I had fallen asleep while deep in thought. Leaving the plane, I felt a sense of refreshment, a stark contrast to the heaviness I felt when leaving home. At the airport, I met up with the local staff who came to pick me up and was guided to the branch office. There, we discussed the details of this transaction. Thailand is a vital hub in Southeast Asia for our company, holding significant importance. On the final day of my trip, after smoothly progressing through negotiations and successfully concluding the contract, all that was left was my return home. A letter from Japan arrived at the hotel where I was staying. Why would they send it by mail when a call or email from the company would suffice, especially since it was addressed to me personally? Curious, I opened it to find a single piece of paper inside. Unfolding it, I saw that it was a divorce paper, signed and stamped by Lucy. Sending the papers all the way to Bangkok. Couldn't she have waited until I got back to Japan? Feeling frustrated, I decided to call Lucy anyway. Oh, how unusual. Did the post arrive by any chance? Lucy asked, her tone dripping with meaning. Yeah, the divorce papers did. What's this all about? I asked calmly. Lucy grinned and laughed. What do you think? I want a divorce. You've been neglecting the family so much that I've finally run out of patience, she declared triumphantly. Is that so? I responded. Lucy just laughed scornfully. I'm serious. Even our daughter agrees with the divorce, she rattled on, not giving me a chance to speak. So there you go. I'll be taking a hefty alimony. Thank you very much. It's all your fault for always disregarding the family. In the background, I could hear Hazel's voice. That's right, it's all Dad's fault. You better take responsibility, she said, berating me. This will make our lives easier. As I listened to their barrage of insults, Lucy burst out laughing. Come on, why so silent? Shocked at being dumped. Maybe he's crying over there. I quietly told them, Understood. Let's get a divorce. I'll give you everything I own. I promise. I'll also take the savings. You have no complaints, right? After all, I've supported you all this time, so you should be grateful and hand it over, Lucy said, and I could almost see her smirking over the phone. Understood. Let's proceed with that, I said. As I heard their triumphant laughter, I hung up the phone. Well, things are about to get busy, I muttered to myself and decided to get moving right away. Upon returning to Japan, I immediately submitted the divorce papers and completed all the necessary procedures. Feeling a sense of relief I hadn't felt in 30 years, I cracked open a beer, leaned back in the chair I'd brought out onto the deck, and enjoyed the pleasant breeze. A hum escaped me involuntarily. Then my cell phone rang loudly. Who's that? I thought, picking up the phone. Lucy's name flashed on the screen. "Hello," I answered, and immediately Lucy's hysterical screaming blasted through the line. "What do you think you're doing?" she yelled, her voice so loud it distorted the sound. "What do you mean? What do you think you're doing? What's going on?" I responded coolly. For a moment, all I could hear was her heavy breathing, as if she was out of breath. Something about a certificate of content arrived. She started speaking again, still panting. "Just as it says, due to the divorce, your infidelity has been uncovered, so I'm claiming compensation." "It's not just that, is it?" I said, my voice steady. Lucy's voice trembled. "Yeah, it includes the DNA test results that Hazel isn't my daughter, right? There's also evidence you tricked me into raising Hazel, so I'm asking for the return of all the child-rearing expenses I've incurred. If you're not willing, we'll go to court." "But I can't pay something like $300,000, she stammered. "Then why not have Hazel's real father pay? Seems fair, doesn't it?" "What were you talking about?" she stuttered. "Don't play dumb. I know everything. All of it," I said in a low voice, making Lucy gasp in fear. But he doesn't have that kind of money anymore. His ex-wife took everything. The savings, the retirement fund, everything." Her feeble excuse was as good as admitting Hazel had a different father. I was exasperated by Lucy's usual foolishness. "It's the former executive vice president Brown, right?" Lucy gasped on the other end of the phone. "I only found out about this recently myself. Surprised me too, to think that our matchmaker at our wedding was actually your lover, Lucy." Lucy groaned, but then, as if realizing something, asked, "Did you tell Brown's wife about this?" I was impressed Lucy caught on for once. "That's right. You catch on quick." I gathered all the evidence and informed his wife. "All this meddling is too much," she said, grinding her teeth, but there was nothing more Lucy could do. His wife was furious about the years of betrayal. Their son is a lawyer, and through his connections, they hired a top-notch attorney. "They managed to take almost all of his assets, didn't they?" I added. "Speaking of which, his wife mentioned she was going to sue you for damages as well." "What did you say?" Lucy screamed, and then there was the sound of rustling papers. This. It seemed she had also received a certified letter from Brown's wife, demanding $50,000 in damages. "I can't pay that." "Wow, that's $350,000 in total." "Impressive. Good luck with that. Hey, if you're short on cash, you could always sell some land." "Oh, that's right. The deed is in my name now, isn't it?" Lucy's voice brightened at my reminder. "That's right. It's all done. So I'm going to hang up now." After hanging up, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. About a year ago, I accidentally learned of Lucy's trickery and the truth about Hazel. As for my former boss, the ex-executive vice president Brown, I learned his secret when I was supposed to dine with a client at a restaurant. The client was running late by about an hour, and while waiting, I decided to get some coffee. As I turned around, I saw Lucy and Brown entering together. Brown was my boss, and Lucy, being from the same company, knew him well, especially since he was the matchmaker at our wedding. We've continued to send gifts for mid-year and year-end traditions without fail, but the way Lucy and Brown were together that time felt more intimate than just acquaintances. There was a strangely clingy vibe. I didn't say anything and immediately turned around, making sure they didn't notice me. Conveniently, they were seated at a table across from mine, separated by a pillar. I couldn't see them, but in the quiet restaurant, I could barely hear their voices. "Lucy, it's been a while." "Yes, I thought we could see each other more since you retired, but you never get in touch." Lucy's voice sounded petulant. My bad. When I was working, any excuse would do, but now that I'm at home, it's harder to find a reason to go out." I was confused. Brown must have retired last year, so why this sudden familiarity? Lucy's tone was so different, completely unlike the aloof attitude she usually showed me. "How's Hazel? Is she doing well?" Lucy asked, her voice warm. "Yes, she's really into K-pop idols lately, making a fuss about going to their concerts," Brown replied. Hearing Hazel's name, I couldn't help but listen more closely. "Is that so? No prospective husbands in sight?" Lucy continued, "Not at all. I keep telling George to introduce her to some promising young men, but that incompetent fool can't bring a single decent suitor," she spat out. "Did she just call me incompetent?" Brown laughed lightly, mocking me as well. "That's to be expected of him. He's not the type to think ahead. Raising someone else's child for 30 years without a hint of suspicion just shows how oblivious he is." Someone else's child? That phrase kept echoing in my mind, leaving me panicked. "It was right after George proposed to you, so I let my guard down," Brown continued. "But it's good George never doubted it. He believed she was his own." They laughed together, joyously. "I really want to tell everyone she's my daughter. My wife and I only had sons, so having a daughter later in life is special," Brown added. "I'm pleased to hear you say that. Hazel knows you're her real father and is proud of it," Lucy responded. "Is that so? If she wants anything, make sure she tells me." "I want my precious daughter to have the best," Brown said. "Let's go dine at a fancy restaurant together sometime soon," Lucy suggested, her tone wheedling, but I was far beyond caring. Hazel knows her real father and is proud of it. My vision darkened and cold sweat broke out. I felt faint, barely recalling the rest of their conversation. Somehow, I managed to leave the restaurant unnoticed and called my client to cancel our meeting, claiming I wasn't feeling well. The client apologized, concerned about my health. Strangers are far kinder, I found myself muttering. I've been betrayed by my former boss, my wife, and my daughter all along. I don't remember how I got home, but when I came to, I was lying on my bed. Neither Lucy nor Hazel had come home yet. As I stared up at the ceiling, I swore I would uncover the truth about Lucy and Brown. Hiring a private investigator didn't take long to confirm my suspicions. They were involved in an affair. Worse, it started even before she married me. Talking to someone who had retired, I learned their affair was quite well known back then. Then came the DNA test. When Hazel came home drunk and fell asleep in the living room, I secretly took a saliva sample. I felt utterly miserable, doubting the paternity of the daughter I had once cherished. But now, realizing she was just as deceitful as Lucy, my anger replaced any lingering affection. The results confirmed it. She wasn't my biological daughter. As I looked at the evidence of Lucy and Brown's infidelity and the DNA test results, I laughed. It was a dry, hollow laugh. "I'll use this evidence to drag them through the mud," I swore to myself. A year went by as I waited for the right moment. When Lucy lied about going to a hot spring with friends and instead went out with Brown, I didn't miss my chance. I contacted Brown's wife, revealing their affair with the evidence I had gathered. She turned pale as she examined the proof, but promised to fully cooperate with me. With the help of a top-notch lawyer and her son, we stripped Brown of everything. He was cast out, just as his wife had promised. "It's your turn now." I remember her words when I reported back to her 3 days later. Then Lucy called me again, her voice frantic. "What's the meaning of this?" she yelled. "What do you mean? What's the meaning of this?" "Maybe you should expand your vocabulary," I replied, exasperated. Lucy breathed heavily in frustration. "You transferred the deed to that land, that remote mountain. It's practically worthless. I talked to a real estate agent, and they said I'd lose money selling it. The maintenance fees and taxes are a nightmare." I calmly replied to her shrill protests. "You said you wanted everything I owned. I just made your wish come true. Thanks, by the way. That land from Grandpa was a burden, so you taking it off my hands really helped me out." After my sarcastic thanks, Lucy probably fell silent from sheer anger. Then I heard a voice shout, Mom, it's a disaster. Wait, Dad, is that you? The call switched to video chat, and Lucy's face looked furious while Hazel's was pale with shock. I just went to the bank to check our account, Mom. Calm down. There's less than $100 left. Lucy's jaw dropped. Dad, what's going on? Hazel glared at me. There's no money left because you all spent it, I replied calmly. Lucy glared at me, raising her voice. Take a good look. My paycheck gets deposited, right? But almost every month, it just disappears. And what about the bonuses? They went straight to your overseas trips, designer bags, and spa treatments. No way, that can't be true. But as Hazel looked at the bank statements, her expression said it all. She was dumbfounded. You know, George, Lucy continued, it's your job to take care of your wife and daughter. Yet, you haven't managed to save a single penny. You're utterly incompetent. I met her harsh words with a cold response. I haven't bought anything for myself since we got married. Everything was for you and Hazel. And what did I get in return? Betrayal and mockery. Why should I satisfy someone who treats me like that? Behind Lucy, I noticed Brown peeking out. It seemed he'd been there all along. Kicked out by his wife, he must have ended up at Lucy's place. George, long time, no see, Brown said, trying to sound calm, though he looked more disheveled than before. Long time no see, Mr. Brown, I replied firmly. His face twisted as I continued. After betraying people for so long, now you're kicked out, with no home or money. What do you want from me? Brown forced a smile. What's the matter, George? That's not like you. We're talking about the wife you've been with for 30 years and the daughter you cherish. Stop being petty and help them out, will you? His words made my blood boil. Help? Why should I? Why don't you help Lucy and Hazel if you care so much? Brown shrugged sadly. George, I'm just an old man now. My relationship with Lucy wasn't what you think. She was just helping me out. So please, with a generous heart, help Lucy and Hazel. And me too, in our time of need. I watched him, realizing he might have always been this shameless, but it was only now becoming clear. Just then, Hazel cried out, almost screaming, Dad, your daughter's in trouble. We can't even afford food. You stopped the credit card, remember? It's been unusable since yesterday. Then, Hazel, maybe you should work and support your real father, I replied coldly. What are you talking about? You're my father. Hazel shot back, her eyes fierce and determined. Didn't you say you'd rather have a rich executive as your father than someone incompetent like me? If that's the case, you should cherish that father you're so proud of, I said, trying to guide her to the truth. Hazel exploded. What are you talking about? Sure, I heard he was rich and had a fancy degree, but now he's just a broke, jobless old man. I don't need someone who can't even buy me anything. She started stomping and yelling, while Brown beside her looked petrified. Right, you transferred all your assets to Lucy, didn't you? Then this house belongs to her, she said. We could sell it and get a significant amount of money. Panicked, Brown blurted out, Yes, that's right. It's a high-rise luxury apartment. It might fetch around $1 million, right, Lucy? Hazel's anger vanished as she suddenly smiled. That's amazing. We're set for a while. Brown turned to me cheerfully. George, my apologies, but we're going to sell this condo you bought and use the money for living expenses and alimony payments. I enlightened him with a simple fact. What are you talking about? This condo was never in my name, so it doesn't belong to Lucy. Lucy was shocked. But that's not what you promised. You said you'd give me all your assets. I smiled. Yeah, that's why I transferred the ownership of those mountains to you. Plus, I gave you the furniture and appliances you bought for your hobbies, even though they were bought with my card. Those mountains are nothing but a nuisance, Lucy exclaimed, slumping to the floor. Then whose name is this condo under? Hazel demanded. At that moment, a man popped up beside me, causing Hazel and the others to scream. This is Kenny, my childhood friend and current employer. What employer? What are you talking about? Lucy asked, bewildered. I quit my job and am now in Bangkok, Thailand, I explained. Kenny's been running a company here and had invited me before. I never mentioned it because I knew you'd never approve. The first thing I thought after getting divorced and becoming free was that now I could work with Kenny. But what about this condo? Lucy pressed on. Kenny took over. Long time no see, Lucy. You might not remember me. We only met at the wedding. I bought this condo as an investment. I didn't want to rent it to just anyone, and when I heard George was looking for a place, I told him he could rent it cheaply while saving up to build his dream house after retirement. So that's why the condo is Kenny's, I added, watching as Lucy and the others looked disappointed, their plans to sell it thwarted. Kenny continued cheerfully, You'll probably hear from the real estate agent, but please move out by the end of this month. I rented it to George and his family, but now that you're divorced, Lucy, you're a stranger. And Hazel wasn't really his daughter, right? So I have no reason to rent the place to you. Lucy and the others started shouting at each other, hurling insults. It all stemmed from Mom making Dad angry. I told you to handle it better, I said. First, Brown told me to trick George into thinking Hazel was his child when I got pregnant. If you're going to deceive, at least keep it up until the end. You got caught because you were sloppy. It's your fault. The argument had become unpleasant and unbearable. If you want to debate, do it later. Pack your belongings now. I'm ending this call, I stated firmly. The trio glared at me. Then Lucy cried out, George, it was all a misunderstanding. It was an error. I only love you. When I was younger, this man deceived me. Hazel was a mistake, and I don't need her anymore. Let's pretend the divorce never happened. I'm a victim too, so let's go back to how things were. Please, I was just lonely and foolish. Hazel snatched the phone from Lucy. Dad, you're the only dad I have. You've always taken care of me. Don't listen to Mom. Let's live together, just the two of us. I'll show you your grandchildren someday. Can I come live with you too? Immediately, Brown chimed in. George, Bang is an excellent choice. Southeast Asia is booming. I'd love to work at that company too. Despite my age, my achievements speak for themselves. Please introduce me to your friend Kenny. The trio argued over the phone, trading insults back and forth. Kenny and I watched in disbelief, feeling overwhelmed. Finally, I quietly hung up the phone. The past decade had been a grueling journey for Kenny. With empathy, he acknowledged the challenges I had confronted in cutting ties with those who had caused me distress. As we clinked our chilled beers, a sense of relief washed over us, toasting to the newfound freedom that lay ahead. The real estate agent's directive had compelled Lucy and her companions to vacate the condo, despite their efforts to remain. Regrettably, her family had refused to provide them shelter, leaving them to wander between internet cafes. Brown's circumstances were even more dire, as his wife's powerful connections had obstructed his ability to secure employment or lodging. Ultimately, his desperation led to an unfortunate outburst, resulting in his arrest. As I reflected on these events, a sense of vindication emerged, tempered by the realization of the profound personal toll that betrayal and adversity can take. Ashamed, Lucy and Hazel vanished from the city without a trace, rumors swirling about them living in seclusion in the distant mountains. Since then, I've joined Kenny's company, and our sales have steadily climbed. The people here are kind, filling the void left by Lucy and Hazel. Sharing a beer with Kenny after work, discussing the business, and reminiscing has become my greatest joy, despite my fatigue. I'm deeply grateful for this change. Reflecting back, I see I wasted time due to misjudging people. But those lessons have taught me to treasure the wonderful company I now have. In the years ahead, I aim to cherish my relationship